Hey everyone, welcome to Recombinant Teaching. I'm your host, Justin Schaefer, and on this show, I'm holding STEM education office hours where I'll unpack your questions on STEM pedagogy, student success, academic careers, and everything in between. I've taught about 10,000 students in my 13 career, and just like you, I've spent countless hours in the trenches working with students, helping them learn how to succeed in college and beyond. Through hosting this show, I hope that we can learn from each other, solve some problems, share some tips and advice, and ultimately improve STEM education together. If you have a question you'd like me to tackle, check out my website or the show notes and click the Submit a Question link. Whether you want to write in, send an audio clip, or join me live, I'd love to have you be a part of the show. And with that, let's get to our guest for the day. So again, another live guest on this episode, and I'm really excited because I think we're going to get a little artsy maybe in our conversation. So I'd like to introduce you to Dr. Jane Harrington, and she's going to tell us a little bit about herself. So welcome, Jane.
Hi. Thanks for having me. My background, I'm a PhD researcher. So I was a lab rat and I love bacteria. So I like to give that preface. I love microbes. Most of my career was teaching medical school in the Caribbean. I've also taught undergraduate. And during the pandemic, I said, this is terrible. I mean, trying to teach off a PowerPoint slide to a Zoom dot. Students across the globe. And so now I'm a tech founder in our company, MedMicroMaps. We are providing education solutions for a roadmap from the basics you learn in high school, and we use gaming in the Quest VR. And then we also have the Atlas book for medical education students. And recently I'm doing professional development with high school educators.
Oh, that's fantastic. And I'm really excited to unpack some of that. And, also seeing a fellow educator get the entrepreneurial bug. So, I've been trying to, right? It's fun, right? It's a new muscle. It's a new way to use your brain. And, I've been trying to do that with my business the last few years. And I love meeting people that are also doing that. So you're just a lot more technically inclined than I am, I think. So cool. But yeah, let's unpack this a little bit. So what's your question, Jane?
My question is, where does A for art belong in STEM education?
All right. That's a fun question. So, right, you think about STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math. Sometimes we call it STEAM, right? So science, technology, engineering, art, and math. Did I spell it right? Yeah, I did. STA. Right. Okay. I didn't do so good on the verbal GRE back in the day. But yeah, so where's the art fit in? Where's the A fit in? And I think it obviously does. Do people think it should be in the acronym? I don't know. But it's definitely part of what we do, right? I mean, I'm trained as a chemical engineer, a bioengineer, a molecular biologist, and I think you can argue it fits in all of that place, right? So whether you're an engineer, where obviously creativity, right, is a huge part of engineering design thinking and how you're going to input that in that process of iteration and design and testing, you got to be creative. You have to. Like when I was a kid, I did Legos like my son does now, but we're very different, me and my boy, because he can build whatever with them and just go off script, if you will. I couldn't do that. I would build what's on the instructions and just let it sit there. Like I don't have that creative part of me with designing, buildings and engineering in that respect, but I do have the creativity when it comes to teaching. So it's another place where I think art can come in, whether it's in the training of the students and the actual content and being creative and having an artistic element, but also in the design of your coursework, the design of your assessments, design of your assignments. So I like to think of myself as a course designer, and there's a lot of creativity and not true art because I can't draw really, but there's other ways to be creative and artsy with that, right? That you can implement that freedom into what you're designing as an instructor. But I would love to hear for your ideas on this too. What do you think about the A with STEM education? How do you actively, when you were an educator, now with your business, how do you incorporate it?
I use Steam, because we work in the XR space, so extended reality, gaming, absolutely. And, tying back to really when I started to realize the power of the conversation between the very technical scientist and the artist, I was teaching medical students and explaining very complex immunology, inflammation. And when you're just using words, black and white text, the imagination cannot understand. We can't comprehend it. About 2/3 of us are visual spatial learners, and so text alone is inefficient. So I started working with our college department, and was the Center for Biomedical Visualization. And I said that's where the magic really started happening. very talented artists, the medical illustrators, they're trained in the skill. And then me as a scientist, I needed to learn the vocabulary. And that's where true creativity really happened. And so I have a series of animations that were made, infographics, and some very complex concept that students could never grasp. I showed them a 2-minute animation. They got it instantly. And so I really, shifting to getting into tech entrepreneurship, realizing that the artists are pushing the boundaries of tech and they're really filling a need. And so science without art is just black and white, and it's really for short-term learning, versus science with art is really true creativity, and it's such an amazing, powerful medium to communicate.
Yep. No, I love that response, and I love what you're doing there by working with the artists, with the tech, and being the kind of science communication thoroughfare, right? Trying to make sure it all sense. Medical illustration, obviously, a great example too. And I teach anatomy, taught human anatomy for a long time, anatomy and physiology now, and there's so many studies on the power of the visual for anatomy, right? And it's but
I'm
yeah,
sorry to say, anatomy is a perfect use
yeah.
case of art because our understanding of anatomy came from art. So I'm sorry for interrupting.
Oh, you're totally right. You think about those pictures of, Vesalius drew back in the 1500s in Italy, Henry Gray in Gray's Anatomy, the textbook, not the TV show Gray's Anatomy, but the book Gray's Anatomy, right? Those pictures are gorgeous. And there is literature showing that for students nowadays, if you draw processes out, it will help you learn. Whether you're artistic or not, whether you can do the right shading or perspective, doesn't matter. But just the fact that you're drawing structures, drawing tissues, it will help you learn them better as you're being active with your studying there. There's also anatomy coloring books, right? So these, though, I don't know if there's efficacy on those. I've looked at literature. I tried doing a study myself when I was at Irvine, and unfortunately didn't go anywhere with my student Chrissy at the time. But but at least it's enjoyable, right? To color, relaxing almost, and you're looking at structures as you're doing it, and you're being creative. So maybe that helps you learn too. But yeah, there's just a ton with these visual fields. But even in the more abstract fields, right? Molecular biology, biochemistry, right? You can't see those things. So having the visuals are so important, and having a good set of visuals is important. As you were explaining, you showed your students that 2-minute animation, and right, they just got it. Because if it's just text and you're trying to understand, let's say, DNA replication, that can be challenging. But if you see a good model, you see a good simulation, that's quality art, that can be really, really valuable. So I'm wondering too, I'm going to ask you a question now, based on where we're at nowadays with all the AI generation of images, of videos, do you see that as a tool that we can exploit as educators in the STEM fields and making it more STEAM? Or do you feel like we should be kind of keeping our human illustrators, human video content generators employed?
Humanity.
Yeah.
Humanity. And that's what I, my experiences with medical students and, in undergraduate and other disciplines. But during the pandemic, the stress of the reality where it was a barrier to learning. So I actually was a mentor for a class, Justice, Art, and Medicine, and we were exploring topics of healthcare, especially about systemic barriers. And the students produced artwork, and I mean, it was just mind-blowing. And that activity where we were learning real-world skills that were applying to their practice as physicians, and it brought so much humanity. And so for now, the tools, the generative tools, I personally, just the output itself, I certainly work all the time. I use it as like a sketch or a draft and say, I have this idea that I have trouble communicating in words. I'm going to throw it into my messy verbal vomit.
Yep.
And I'm going to get the impression of what the machine thinks I'm trying to come across. And then I use that to add the humanity. And so for an educator, they say, I would like to convey some biological process. Well, as of right now, what the generative AI is coming out with, it's just not right. Like there's a whole bunch of AI fails.
Oh, yeah.
But it's a fantastic tool to get started.
Yep.
And I would encourage educators and students alike of, I don't understand this biological process. Let's put in the text into these tools and it's going to come up with a visual flow. Like immunology is a great example, or physiology, the step by step.
Yep.
And then from that, then you say, okay, now let's work with my classmates, my tutor, my teacher, and go through this and say, hey, how can we make this better? How can we tailor this for what my learning needs are right now? So I think of the the generative AI. It serves a purpose, but it's akin to having an iPad tablet for drawing, or having I had my Wacom tablet, or old school. I had an interactive whiteboard.
Yep.
So all of those are just an intermediate between the teacher and the learner.
And the key with all those examples you gave, right, is the learner, the student, putting pencil on paper, whether it's
Yeah.
digital or wood, and right from a tree, to actually try to express your ideas, and then maybe use the robots there to help kind of stimulate that creativity. But yeah, I think there's a lot of great ways we can incorporate those tools, but still, like you said, keep the humanity there, right? Because art is a very personal thing. I think it feels shallow and cheap when there's the AI generated stuff, because there's no
Mhm.
like kind of soul with it, if you will, right? So it can be really cool, it can be really interesting, but it's not human. So we got to kind of think we need to start fighting to keep that somehow a little bit more as we keep moving through the education process and navigating these times. But I think we both agree, right, that yeah, as much as we can do to infuse the creativity, to infuse artistic expression, to infuse that kind of freedom way of thinking into our classes, whether it's biology, chemistry, physics, math, we're going to do it good for our students. So thanks for that question, Jane.
Yeah.
I hope that was a good answer, but it was a fun discussion
Yeah.
regardless. So yeah, thanks.
Lots of examples about why art does belong with
Yes.
our STEM education, and I encourage it. So I've debated about it. So thank you for giving an
Oh,
opportunity to even discuss about why.
oh, good. Yeah, I'm not at the level of debating it, but I agree with you. I think we're on the same page there, so that's awesome. And we'll make sure we put a link in the notes about all the cool stuff you're doing with integrating art with your business there too in the show notes. So that's
Awesome.
it. Yeah, great. Yeah, anytime. And yeah, that's it for this episode of Recombinant Teaching. If you want to be a
Love
part of
it.
the show, check the show notes for the link, and also check out my website if you'd like to learn how I can work with you, your department, or your institution to improve STEM education. Thanks for listening, everybody, and happy teaching.